Urban legends that haunt our cities. Discover the unexplained and cursed truth. In a quiet suburban neighborhood in Illinois, darkness lurked beneath the orderly facades. The eerie hush of Treetop Lane held secrets, whispers carried on the wind. There were stories, legends that stomped around in the shadows, eager to devour the unsuspecting. Flickering porch lights cast long shadows where eyes are always watching. Here, monsters sleep not beneath the bed, but among us. Sarah, a nurse battling exhaustion from long shifts at the hospital, cherished her rare days off. Exhausted yet determined, she yearned for a few stolen moments of peace. But that day, something peculiar happened. One visit to the local library led her hands to a dusty book, City Shadows. The leather cover cracked like dry skin, and inside, the pages whispered recounts of horrors long buried. The ghostly figure of a woman with hollow eyes waiting at the bus stop, shadows that slid through cracked doors, and tales of a good Samaritan who instead lured the lost to ruin. Urban legends, she mused, shaking her head as laughter echoed her disbelief. Yet, when her children began recounting odd tales, her son's wide eyes, claiming to see a masked figure slipping through their backyard, stopped her heart. "It was just a shadow, Mommy," he insisted, laughter hidden beneath a tremor. Then came her daughter, curious fingers tracing strange symbols etched into the wooden doorframe, the light in her eyes dimming. "They're letters, Mommy," she murmured, her small brow furrowed. Chills raced down Sarah's spine. The creeping sensation of being watched pulled tighter around her. Just kids' games, she rationalized, but unease settled in her gut. She turned to the police, jaws gaping in disbelief at her concerns, offering gentle chuckles and eye rolls, a wave of dismissal. She was just a tired mother, surely letting her imagination run wild. But paranoia seeped deeper, spider-webbing doubts in her mind. "City shadows," words from the book echoed. The bus stop with its ghostly passenger, the neighbor whose smile seemed too wide, too perfect. Did they know about the family that vanished a decade ago? Their house, stagnant in decay, its windows haunted by dust and shadows? Sarah's breath quickened each evening. Every creak echoed malevolence. Disturbing, familiar faces morphed into potential threats. Late at night, trembling hands gripped the phone. Her heart raced. She clutched the flashlight like a weapon, illuminating corners that felt darker than the night deserved. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. An insatiable itch for truth clawed at Sarah. The closer she drew to the ominous legends, the more she wondered about those she thought she trusted. The cozy neighbor who brought cookies? An accomplice to something sinister? Frantic, she began collecting pieces. Voices grew louder. Shadows danced close until a hair-raising realization struck. The masked figure was real. Tonight, she would wait. Heavy curtains blurred the outside world. Behind the window, she felt the chill of knowing something was out there, watching. With dread pooling in her chest, she caught movement behind the curtain of someone she'd never doubted. Who could it be? Was she too late to protect her family from the lurking horror just beyond the light? The closing dark whispered promises of unveiling terrible truths. A cold sweat dripped down Sarah's back as the shadows danced just out of reach. Heart pounding, she pressed her face closer to the window, squinting into the thick blackness outside. The streetlights flickered. Were her eyes playing tricks, or had she actually seen a figure lurking near the fence? It was still, unnaturally so, merging seamlessly with the darkness. She gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam a fragile lifeline against the encroaching night. Every creak of the house felt like nails on a chalkboard, each sound twisting her insides further. She glanced at the clock, 11:10. The kids were finally asleep, wrapped in the innocence of dreams, oblivious to the dread that gnawed at her mind. Would they wake up to horror? Gathering courage, she moved toward the door, each step a miniature battle against the heavy weight of fear. The air felt thick, charged with something she couldn't name. Outside, the stillness was deafening, each heartbeat slicing through the silence like a scream. She peered through the peehole, shadows cascading across her view. The figure moved closer, blurring on the fringes of her vision. A flash of white darted, just a flicker, and then it was gone. Panic clawed at her throat, and she hushed the urge to cry out, lest the haunting intrude upon her home. "Get a grip, Sarah," she whispered to herself, voice trembling. "It's just a trick of the light." But denial cracked under the weight of her fear. The figure had felt tangible, too real to ignore. She glanced at her phone. No calls, no messages. She was utterly alone. As she exhaled, a low thud resonated from the back of the house. It was barely perceptible, but so deeply unsettling. Instinct kicked in. She whipped around, flashlight poised like a weapon, heart racing. That thud, it felt deliberate. Someone was testing her fortress, toying with her sanity. "You're being paranoid," she muttered, always the one to jump to conclusions. Yet even as she said it, the clenching dread strengthened. The stories from the book surged forward in her mind, tales of lurking spirits, masked figures, shadows shaped like men. Would she become yet another victim to this cursed neighborhood? She opened the door cautiously, heart thrumming in her ears. She tiptoed through the hallway, knowing each creak of the floorboards echoed like a plea to the night. Would she betray her children's safety by being too reckless? What if she was wrong and there was no danger? But just as her thoughts spiraled into a murky haze, another thud echoed, clear now, more insistent. It was closer, somewhere near the back door. She could feel the air chill around her, as if the darkness had grown hungry. Sarah hesitated, then crept to the kitchen, every instinct screaming for her to turn back. Shadows pooled in every corner, a maze of unease. She raised her flashlight, wavering light slicing through pitch black. There it was, the back door, slightly ajar, creaking in protest against the stillness. Terror slammed against her, crushing her breath. With trembling hands, she reached for the door, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm. As she flung the door wide, desperate to confront the unknown, the night swallowed her call of "Hello?" Silence answered, heavy and palpable. But something darted past her, a figure slipped into the darkness just beyond the reach of her light. "Mommy?" A tiny voice echoed from the staircase. Sarah's heart sank. Her children, without a protector, unaware of the danger encroaching upon them. "Stay inside," she screamed, spinning back toward the open door. She peered into the engulfing night. The chill whispered through the doorway, beckoning her. But who was out there? With courage or folly, she took a step outside. Step by step, she ventured into the vast unknown, the door behind her swinging shut. But then she realized. A deeper terror arose. A shadow in the corner of her eye darted again, too quick, too nimble, watching her every move. What was lurking in the darkness? Was it truly human? When would she uncover the twisted truth of Treetop Lane? She felt her grip slipping on the last threads of safety, her heart a chaotic drum of dread as she faced whatever waited to emerge from the shadows. The night twisted around Sarah like a living, breathing entity. Goosebumps lined her arms, each rustle in the foliage beyond the door sending a fresh wave of dread coursing through her veins. She fought the instinct to bolt back inside, knowing her children's safety hinged on her bravery. "Mommy!" The voice broke through the silence again, more insistent this time, a soft whimper that tugged at her heart and filled her with panic. Had she really heard it from so far away? The shadows thickened, enveloping her as she strained to peer into the darkness. "Kids, stay there," she shouted, her voice trembling, a fragile command amidst the oppressive gloom. The night only chuckled back, its white spaces veiling that which watched and waited. Just then, a faint rustling broke the stillness, drawing her eyes toward the far side of the yard where the fence loomed. Like a sentinel, she swung the flashlight in that direction and caught a glimpse, a fleeting shadow darting behind a tree, but not before she saw it, something white, glinting like bone. Panic surged anew. What was hidden in the night? Was it the same figure she'd seen earlier? Another thud resounded from the back of the house, sharp and clear. It rolled through her, electric and dark, feeding on her fear. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself, her breath hitching in her throat. Just look around. You can hear them." Sarah focused on the doorway again. Could she risk not checking on her kids? Just as she turned, the soft creak of the back door made her freeze. It moved, just a bit, as if something had brushed against it. That creeping thought, the idea that whatever was out here had slipped inside, took root, unraveling the strands of her sanity. "Hold on," she shouted, desperation spilling into her voice again. "I'm coming!" She rushed toward the door, but as she stepped closer, she felt it, a presence brushing against her shoulder, colder than the night air itself. She swung around, flashlight aimed, but there was nothing there. Her heart hammered against her chest, a relentless rhythm pushing her toward the door. A wail ripped through the quiet, a child's shriek echoing from the house. "Mom!" It was Sam. He sounded frightened, frantic. Without another moment's hesitation, she burst inside, footfalls thundering against the hardwood. "I'm here! I'm here!" She ran down the hall, the light from her flashlight leading her headlong into the sanctuary she'd constructed, a place of dreams that now felt like a cage. "Sam! Claire!" Each room stood dark, shrouded in uncertainty. As she reached the children's room, shivers crawled up her spine. The door creaked open, and there they sat up in bed, wide-eyed, shadows stretching behind them like elongated fingers. "Mommy, what's happening?" Claire asked, her voice wrapped in fear. "Just stay close," Sarah told them, grazing her hand over their heads protectively. Instinct screamed that they were not safe within these walls. Whatever it is, we'll face it together. But then the hairs on her arms rose as she felt it again, a change in the air, a sound much closer now. A low whisper curled around her, coiling like smoke, brushing past her ear. "Come outside, Sarah." The flashlight flickered in response, casting all sorts of shapes across the room. The fear pooling in their little eyes reflected her own. She could hear her heart in her ears, pounding out a frantic question. Who was calling her? Then the unmistakable sound of laughter broke out from the back door, echoing through the house. It wasn't her kids. It was chilling, distant, unsettling. Each laugh resonated deep within her. It rang out like a taunt, a twisted invitation to venture into the night. "What was that?" Sam cried, clutching his sister tighter. Sarah's blood ran cold. She had no answers. But she knew one thing. There were tricks played. Amidst the tales of Treetop Lane, And now they were upon her. A choice loomed: confront what waited outside, or shield her children from the terror that stalked their dreams. Heart racing, she felt the weight of the moment. Would she step into the void of uncertain horror, or fight to hold on to her last flicker of hope? And as those laughter echoes faded into a ghostly hush, she made her choice. All hope of retreat vanished. She turned toward the children, steeling her resolve. We need to face this together. But with every step she took toward the back door, fear wrapped tighter around her throat. Because in chasing shadows, she feared she might discover the darkest truth of Treetop Lane. What awaited them beyond the door? What horrors would she unearth? The door loomed before Sarah, each inch solid wood, but feeling like a gateway to something much darker. With every heartbeat, the laughter echoed louder in her ears, like a noose tightening around her thoughts. She swallowed hard, glancing back at her children, their faces pale and trembling, eyes reflecting the flashlight's beam with the innocence of youth now stained by fear. "Stay close to me. Don't look away," she whispered, pushing open the door slowly, each creak sounding like a warning bell. The outside air hit her like a cold slap, sending a shiver through her bones. The yard stretched before them, bathed in the light from her flickering flashlight. But the shadows were different now. They writhed and twisted, as if something lived among them. The air was thick with tension, a palpable force that threatened to drag them into the void. She could see beyond the fence, where the trees swayed again, the distant figure just barely visible, lingering just out of reach, beckoning. "Mommy!" Claire whimpered again, her small hand clammy in Sarah's grip. "Shh, just listen." The laughter stopped, replaced by silence, a deafening stillness that hung heavily between them. It sent cold chills racing down her spine. The only sound was her children's anxious breathing, a reminder that they were still tucked in this horrifying reality. "What was out there?" Sarah muttered under her breath, trying to quell the rising panic. "Please, just stay behind me." She stepped down the porch, the wood creaking ominously beneath her. Each step felt like a challenge from the darkness. As she advanced, the flashlight flickered again, casting wild shadows that danced mockingly across the yard, questioning her resolve. "Where are you?" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. From the corner of her eye, she saw something dart behind the old oak tree, tall and imposing. It felt like it was watching her, a dark figure shrouded in leaves and secrets. With a deep breath, she took one more courageous step forward, heart hammering. "Mommy, I'm scared," Sam said, his voice trembling. I know," she whispered, pausing to give a small squeeze to his hand. "We're brave together." Just then, the night exploded into sound, snapping branches, scuttling leaves, the unmistakable rustle of something moving through the dark. The flashlight flickered once more, casting a blinding bar of light across the yard. But all it revealed was emptiness. "What was that?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. Sarah didn't know, but she felt it. The darkness was alive, swirling around them, its whispers echoing deeper, weaving into her thoughts. "Come outside, Sarah." It wanted her to step away from the safety of her family. It wanted her. A gut-wrenching thought struck her. What if this was all a trap? What if whatever lingered in the night wanted to separate her from her children? She spun on her heel, panic igniting within her. "Back inside, now!" she yelled, urgency fueling her feet. They stumbled, fear propelling them. She felt the looming pressure behind her, something sinister trailing their escape. She clawed at the door, fumbling to turn the knob. The door slammed open, just as a sudden gust extinguished the flashlight's beam. For a fleeting moment, everything was swallowed in darkness, leaving only the sound of her children's ragged breaths. "We need to lock the door," she urged, her hands shaking as she pulled them inside, hugging them close. Just as she managed to shut the door, a loud thump echoed against it. sounds of something pressing on the other side, testing the barriers of safety they had created. "No!" she cried, adrenaline surging through her. "Don't open it! We'll be safe!" The laughter returned, more ominous now, vibrating through the walls, sounding closer, as if it were mocking her desperate pleas. "Mommy," Sam's voice was barely audible through his fear, and in that moment, Sarah understood. That laughter was an invitation. It wanted in. Now, as the fury of the night pounded against their fragile security, she felt a choice rising up within her. How far did the darkness go? What awaited them if they dared to look deeper? "What happens when it finds us?" she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. But the whispers outside grew louder, mingling with the sinister laughter, tempting promises of the dark. And somewhere in that horrid cacophony, one question remained. Who was truly trapped, the hunter or the hunter? As the air thickened with suspense, Sarah's heart raced at the dawning realization. The night was just getting started, and whatever hunted them had only just begun. What would the next move be? The thumping against the door grew more insistent, each impact resonating like a drumbeat in Sarah's chest. She pressed her back against the solid wood, feeling the pulse of fear emanating from her children. Claire's grip tightened on her leg, and Sam had buried his head in her side, whimpering softly. "Stay quiet," she hissed, trying to control the tremor in her voice. The urge to run surged through her, but they were trapped in their own home, with something monstrous waiting for an opening. The laughter continued, twisted and laughter, blending with the shuddering sound of wind. Under pressure. It crawled into her mind, the sinister melody sinking its claws deeper. She couldn't think. All she could do was listen. "Mommy, what is it?" Claire's question hung in the air, trembling with the weight of urgency. Yet it invoked a knot of despair in Sarah's chest. "I don't know, sweetie," she whispered, her throat dry, "but we've got to stay together." The door rattled again, sending her heart into a spasm. It felt as if whatever lurked outside was gauging their resolve, testing the strength of their barricade. "Now!" A loud crash erupted as the door trembled under a violent push, rattling the frame. Sarah yelped, instinctively pulling her children closer. Each small breath seemed louder than the last. "Mommy, what if it gets in?" "Shh!" Sarah felt like she was suffocating beneath the weight of her words. "It won't get in," she promised, though she wasn't sure if she believed it herself. The light flickered ominously, leaving only momentary flashes of their surroundings. The shadows danced around them, stretching and warping, creating grotesque shapes that twisted and turned. She could see the old family portraits on the wall, their eyes seeming to follow her, judging her, reminding her of happier times, now tainted by dread. A sudden silence fell. No laughter, no thumping, just darkness and the quiet gasps of the children. Sarah strained her ears, desperate for any sound, any sign that it hadn't slipped inside while she wasn't looking. And then a low whisper echoed from the depths of the hallway, soft yet cutting through the silence with a chilling clarity. "Come out, Sarah." It was almost melodic, a serpent's song meant to lure her away from safety. The voice curled around her, wrapping itself around her mind. She chuckled darkly, knowing she would never let them go, never leave her children, even if it meant facing whatever was out there. But the whisper returned, insistent, now louder. "Come, let me in." Fear twisted her stomach into knots. Sarah felt the unyielding door pressing against her back, trembling with the certainty that something was waiting just outside. She moved forward a step, a reflexive response to the beckoning call. "Mommy!" Claire's shout pierced through. The sound snapped Sarah back, flooding her with raw clarity. She couldn't allow herself to be consumed. Not now. "We need to think of something," she said, urgently, looking at the sparse furniture around her. With a quick glance towards the dim light of the kitchen, she spotted the heavy iron skillet. If there was something on the brink of entering, she would be ready. "Keep an eye on that door," she ordered, guiding her children away from it, toward the kitchen. "Don't move," she warned, feeling the trepidation in the air like static electricity. The shadows were alive, crawling along the edges, distorting their reality. Just as she reached for the skillet, the front door burst open, swinging wide with terrifying force. The unmistakable scent of decay enveloped the room. Heart pounding, she spun around. In the darkened doorway, a silhouette broke the sharp line of the night's backdrop. It stood there, composed of shadows and malice, refusing to take form. It whispered again, a voice split in eerie echoes. "I've come to play." The children clung to her, their eyes wide with terror. The moment stretched unbearably, time blurred. "Get back!" Sarah shouted as she lifted the skillet high, ready to strike, adrenaline surging through her veins. The silhouette stepped forward, merging into the light. For a moment, it was nothing but darkness. But then, the face emerged. A horrifying reminder of past nightmares that twisted her stomach into frantic knots. Now, the darkness had teeth. And just as Sarah prepared herself for the unthinkable, she realized the game had only just begun. What would it demand of her next? The silhouette lingered in the doorway, shifting and stretching as though it were alive, pulsating with a malevolent rhythm. The features became sharper, a gaunt face with sunken eyes that glimmered like shards of glass in the dark. It smiled, though no warmth radiated from its mouth. It was a grin that promised torment rather than comfort. "Mommy!" Claire screamed, a raw, desperate sound that shattered the electrifying stillness. Sarah felt the weight of her emotions crashing down, a surge of protectiveness washing over her. They were in danger, and she had to fight. "Stay back!" she shouted again, brandishing the skillet like a lifeline. Her hands trembled, but she had to keep them steady, had to be the wall between her children and this nightmare. The figure took a step forward. It was unnaturally fluid, gliding closer as echoes of laughter danced around the room. The air felt thick with an ominous energy, a pressure that seemed to pull at Sarah, urging her towards the shadows. She fought against it, squeezing her eyes shut for a heartbeat, summoning every ounce of courage she had left. "Whatever you want, just leave my kids out of this," she cried, her voice wavering. "Leave?" it hissed, the voice like ice scraping against rock. "Why would I do that when the fun has just begun? You brought me here, Sarah. You chose this." "Stop!" she shouted, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You can't!" Suddenly, without warning, a gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing the flickering light. They were enveloped in darkness, a darkness so profound that even their own breaths became muffled echoes. Panic surged. They were lost, trapped in a void where the only sound was the ragged breathing of her children. "Mommy, I can't see," Sam whimpered, his voice breaking. "Hold on to me," Sarah answered, her own panic rising.
She reached back blindly, fingers brushing against Claire's hair, feeling Sam's small hand clasping her leg. A low chuckle reverberated through the shadows. "You think you're safe," the figure taunted, its voice slithering through the air. "You've invited me in. I have your scent now." Then a soft glow
began to illuminate the room, spectral and pale, revealing the grotesque figure hovering inches from her face. It leaned closer, its features twisted in mockery. "You will play my game, Sarah, or your children will pay the price." Just as the figure lunged forward, Sarah swung the skillet with every ounce of strength she could muster. It connected with a sickening thud, but instead of solid resistance, the figure dissipated like smoke, swirling away, leaving only cold laughter in its wake. "What?" she gasped, her own breath hitching in shock. The laughter echoed again before falling silent, leaving Sarah feeling bare, exposed to the creeping horror surrounding them. "Mommy?" Claire ventured, her voice trembling. "I'm here," Sarah whispered, forcing her heart to slow, trying to think of the next step. A chilling realization gripped her. "It's not over. It never will be," she said, looking at the children wide-eyed and frightened. They were marked now, drawn into a nightmare that was far from finished. "Help me," Sam begged, his voice cracking, the tremor a painful reminder of their precarious situation. Just then, the shadows along the walls began to shift, elongating, twisting into arms that reached out toward them, beckoning, threatening. "We can't stay here," Sarah said, a sense of urgency pounding through her veins. "We need to find a way out." But escape seemed impossible, the house looming like a living entity, a prison fueled by their fear. As they moved toward the hallway, every creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning, as if the home itself disapproved of their escape. With a single flicker, the lights returned, but the room was eerily altered. It felt alive, pulsating with unholy energy, and Sarah's stomach churned. Just behind them, the voice coiled around them, promising, "You can't run away. I am everywhere." As they stepped hesitantly into the hall, the realization settled in like lead. They were no longer simply fighting for survival. They were pieces in a dark game, one that didn't care whether they lived or died. What other secrets did this house hide, and how much longer before they would face the true darkness lurking within? They darted into the hallway, the shadows seeming to stretch and follow. Sarah's heart raced, each thud a drumbeat echoing the terror thrumming in her veins. The house creaked around them like a restless beast, the air thick and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were trying to catch their breath. "Mommy, where are we going?" Claire's fear-stricken voice broke through the darkness, piercing the heavy silence. "Anywhere but here," Sarah replied, trying to sound braver than she felt. She gripped Sam and Claire's hands tightly, refusing to let go. The hall loomed ahead, longer and darker than she remembered, as though it were growing with each step they took. Suddenly, the sound of quiet whispers filled the air. It started low, barely audible, rising like a swelling tide. The whispers seemed to swirl around them, words lost in the chaos, yet Sarah felt the chilling weight of them settling on her shoulders. "Can you hear that?" she murmured, a knot of fear tightening in her stomach. Claire nodded slowly, her eyes wide. Sam, still clutching his mother, trembled against her. "They're coming for us," Sarah whispered, looking around desperately. The shadows flickered, dark and grotesque shapes shifting in the corners of her vision. She could feel their eyes on her, 1,000 hungry stares waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Keep moving," she commanded, pulling them forward. But the whispers grew louder, an almost sinister chant, echoing through the corridor, a promise that they were not alone. Just ahead, the familiar outline of the staircase came into view. The steps appeared to stretch upward into darkness, the heavy banister twisting like a serpent ready to bite. With every step upward, Sarah felt the energy in the house shift. It was like climbing through another layer of dread, each stair creaking a warning. And then it hit her, a realization that slammed into her gut. They were trapped in a cycle, a place that fed on fear. "Where do we go?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. The children remained silent, but she could sense their terror radiating through the connection of their hands. Suddenly, the whispers crested, rising to a deafening crescendo. "Come to us!" "Get away!" Sarah shouted, turning at the sound. But the moment she did, a figure darted past the edge of her vision, a flicker of despair moving quickly along the walls, elongating, twisting back, brushing so close she felt the cold pass through her. "Mommy!" Claire screamed, stepping back nervously. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the hallway. They spun around, hearts racing, to find the entrance they had just passed was now a solid wall. The house was alive, shifting, warping to trap them. "Hold on to me," Sarah shouted, heart pounding. Moving with urgency, she pulled the children tightly to her chest, scanning the hall for any hint of an exit. A faint glow flickered ahead, promising safety, a dim light seeping through a crack in a door at the end of the hall. The walls thrummed softly, almost in response to the light, drawing them closer. "What if it's a trap?" Sam asked, shivering. "I'd rather face whatever's in there than stay here," Sarah insisted, determination flooding her voice. They had to push on. As they sprinted toward the door, the whispers melded into screams, shrieking with laughter and sorrow. "We can't!" Claire's voice was muffled by the din, but Sarah pressed onward, striving to reach the beckoning glow. Then, without warning, the floor beneath them began to tremble, the walls closing in. Panic surged, the lights flickered violently, the glow flickering like a dying star. And then, just as they reached for the doorknob, a deafening crash rang out. An unseen force slammed into them, sending Sarah sprawling. The weight of the darkness pressed in, suffocating and relentless. She struggled to her feet, her heart racing as she looked back and saw nothing but shadows. Where were her children? "Claire! Sam!" she yelled, scrambling to find her footing. "Mommy!" Claire's voice echoed back, filled with an electrifying fear that cut through the chaos. But the shadows had thickened around her, closing in like a constricting serpent. She reached blindly, her fingertips just grazing the door. The laughter exploded into manic shrieks, and Sarah felt her body seize with terror. The house wasn't just a trap, it was a predator, and it was hungry. As she stood there, frozen in dread, a chill swept through the air. The door lurked just out of reach, a glimmer of hope, yet the encroaching shadows held her in place. Would she risk everything to find her children, or would she let herself be swallowed whole? The answer loomed as the darkness circled, ready to reveal the truth. What awaited them beyond that door? Sarah took a deep breath, heart racing, and made her choice. The shadows surged, coiling like serpents, constricting Sarah's breath. "Claire! Sam!" The panic clawed at her throat, each yell swallowed by the oppressive darkness that swirled around her. What had happened? Just moments ago, they were escaping, and now... The laughter, twisted, mocking, drowned her thoughts. "Mommy!" Claire's voice trembled somewhere in the shadows, a beacon in the swirling void. Sarah's heart clenched tight like a fist around ice. She could almost see the shape of her daughter, could almost reach her, yet the shadows stretched impossibly far, clawing at her with unseen fingers. With all her strength, she lunged back into the darkness, hands outstretched, fingers desperately seeking the warmth of her children. "I'm coming! Hold on!" she cried, anxiety spurring her forward. Each step felt as if she were wading through thick fog, the air heavy, charged with unseen electricity that prickled her skin. The laughter intensified, swirling around her like a cyclone. "The house wants you," it seemed to chant. Panic surged again, her every instinct screaming to flee. Yet the thought of leaving without them sparked a fire in her chest. No mother would abandon her children. "Where are you?" she shouted now, her voice raw. "We need to get out!" Suddenly, from the depths of the shadows, a familiar figure emerged. Sam! His small frame wavered in the weak light, his eyes wide with fear. "Mom!" he cried, relief flooding his voice, just as despair clawed at Sarah's heart. "Sam!" She scrambled towards him, her heart pounding with the rhythm of urgency. When she reached him, she enveloped him in a fierce embrace, feeling the warmth of his body ground her fraying nerves. "Where's Claire?" His face fell, eyes darting back into the shadows. "I don't know. She was right here." A cold shiver raced down Sarah's spine. The air thickened, pressing down on them like a weight. "We have to find her." "Mommy!" Claire's voice rose again, closer this time, but still trapped in the dark. The sound twisted through the air, a mix of fear and something else, something sinister. "Claire, I'm coming!" But as Sarah shouted, the shadows shifted, the walls bending in a grotesque dance. The laughter crescendoed, mingling with Claire's cries, confusion and dread bending her thoughts in every direction. "Stay close to me, Sam," she instructed, eyes scanning their surroundings. The once familiar hallway was now a twisted maze, with doors that appeared and vanished like ghosts. The whispers warred against her, swirling with indecipherable words, each syllable pricking at her sanity, gnawing at the edges of her resolve. "This way," Sarah urged, dragging Sam with her toward a momentarily visible door. It glowed faintly, a promising sliver of light amidst the consuming dark. They sprinted, a surge of hope anointing her veins. Yet, just as they reached the door, it slammed shut, rattling in its frame. "No!" Sarah screamed. The shadows lunged at them, swiping with icy tendrils that sent shocks through her bones. "Mommy, please!" Sam cried, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Hold on!" A desperate lunge, a push against the door, a moment of hope. It rattled, but held firm. The shadows pressed closer, their laughter now morphing into desperate wails, filling her with dread. There has to be a way. Suddenly, a booming voice broke through the chaos. "Join us!" it roared, echoing eerily through the hall. The voice was guttural, filled with a malicious glee that made Sarah's blood run cold. It felt like the house itself was calling, offering a twisted comfort in return for their fear. "Out! We need to get out!" Sarah shouted, her body vibrating with fury and fear. She turned, searching, willing the shadows to part. Then, the walls groaned, shifting, warping again. The atmosphere thickened, lacing with the scent of decay, as the door before them began to warp and twist. It wasn't just a door anymore. It was closing in on them, merging with the fragments of shadows, threatening to consume every ounce of light. They could not be trapped here. She couldn't let that happen. "Claire!" Sarah screamed, voice hoarse with desperation and dread. "Mommy, I can't breathe," Sam whimpered, fear etched into his features as the air thinned around them. "Just hold on, please." She fought through the looming darkness, heart racing faster than ever, feeling the shadows breathing down her neck, feeling her grip on reality slip. "Where are you, Claire?" But instead of an answer, the house erupted into laughter, cruel and mocking, and the last spark of light began to fade. The walls trembled ominously as a figure materialized in the dark, deceptively familiar, yet twisted with a terrifying gleam in its eyes. "Join us forever,"
it whispered, a dark invitation laced with malice. Sarah stumbled backward, fear tugging at her limbs, the crushing weight of the darkness around them. Then she realized it was there, an exit, a crack in the wall, just beyond the looming figure that now stood before her and Sam, grinning with sinister intent.
Face the horror or dive deeper into the unknown. "Run!" she screamed. But was it already too late? As she turned to flee, the walls began collapsing in on themselves, the dark figure growing closer with every passing second. Desperation churned in her stomach. What would happen if they didn't make it out? Just before the shadows closed in completely, a chilling whisper echoed through Sarah's mind. "You can't escape. You will never escape." Would they find Claire in time, or would they become another lost echo in this nightmare? With urgency, she lunged toward the opening, feeling the breath of shadow brush against her skin. Awareness flooded Sarah's mind as she dove toward the crack in the wall, her heart pounding like a drum. The shadows screamed behind her, a roar of forgotten anguish echoing through the haunted halls. She felt herself slipping, dangerously close to being pulled into the abyss. "Stay close," she roared to Sam, tugging him along. He stumbled but kept pace, fear etched onto his face. They skidded toward the opening, the cold air biting into her skin just as tendrils of darkness reached greedily behind them. Would it be enough? Would Claire be waiting on the other side? The whispers coiled tighter, weaving through her mind like a thread of despair. We'll take you all, they promised, coaxing her with promises of safety, of reunion. But Sarah knew better. "No," she shouted, "you won't take my family, not now." The defiance in her voice cracked the veil of hopelessness. Fueled by a raw sense of desperation, she charged forward, willing the darkness to yield as her body collided with the wall. The crack widened, splintering as if recognizing her resolve. Suddenly, the shrieks behind them escalated into a thundering roar, and she was certain death would claim them. She pushed through the hole, squeezing her way past jagged edges as she felt the slick warmth of blood, their blood, staining her hands. Then they tumbled out into a flickering corridor, glistening with moisture and dimly lit by the soft glow of distant lights. But the fear didn't fade, it only shifted, amplifying the uncertainty of their surroundings. "Claire!" she called again, hoping against hope that her daughter's name could pierce the walls of despair. "Mommy!" Claire's voice floated through the corridor, fragile as a whispered prayer. "There!" Sam pointed down the hallway, eyes wide with relief. Sarah sprinted. Their feet echoed against the damp floor, and every sound seemed magnified, ricocheting around the tight space like a warning bell. "Please, Claire!" Every step felt heavier than the last, the shadows trailing them like hungry beasts. "I'm coming!" As they reached the end of the corridor, Sarah spotted a door, the kind they had seen only in nightmares. It was battered, but held an otherworldly light. A shimmer of hope flickered, igniting her desperation. "It's okay, Claire, just a bit further." Then she stopped dead in her tracks, feeling an icy grip of dread seep into her bones. Shadows danced along the door. Something more sinister lurked behind it. "Mommy!" Claire cried, her voice breaking, laced with despair and confusion. "What is it?" Sarah's heart raced as she turned toward Sam. "We have to go through. We have to save her." "No!" Sam screamed, his body rigid with fear. "It's a trap. I can feel it." He tugged on her sleeve, but Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. What if Claire was right there? What if they were moments away from rescuing her? She couldn't back down now, not after everything. "We have to trust her," Sarah shouted, the words spilling from her lips as she flung the door open. The sight that met her was like a wicked tableau. The room distorted, shadows flickering like candles frozen in a storm. And there, at the center, stood Claire, eyes wide and shimmering, framed by swirling shadows that stretched toward Sarah like grasping hands.
"Mommy!" Claire's voice trembled, and that innocent plea shattered Sarah's heart. But as she rushed inside, the door slammed shut behind her, sealing them in. The warmth of her daughter seeped away, replaced by an oppressive cold. A figure stepped from the shadows, grotesque and grinning, its eyes glinting with malice. "Welcome home," it hissed, echoing in a voice that twisted the very air around them. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. "Claire, run!" she shouted, knowing the truth now. The house had been waiting for them to play its wicked game. As she moved to grab Claire's arm, the world spun, shadows swirling tighter, dragging them into a void. "You will never escape." The words hung heavily in the air, their weight suffocating, echoing a chilling promise. What lay ahead beyond the shadows? Would they finally uncover the house's malevolent intent? Or would they become part of its cursed story? The darkness beckoned, calling for more. And somewhere, beneath it all, a laugh echoed, knowing all too well that their night was just beginning. The laughter receded into the shadows, and Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. The figure, now more solid than before, grew even closer, its twisted face a grotesque mockery of what terror stood for. It crouched low, silhouetted in the dim light, every movement fluid, gliding like smoke. Panic surged through Sarah as she spotted Claire, frozen in place, caught between fear and trust. "Claire, listen to me!" Sarah shouted, an urgency bursting forth from her soul. "You have to move, now!" Yet the shadows around her daughter pulsed, as if whispering secrets, trying to claw at her courage, pulling her deeper into their embrace. "Mommy!" Claire's voice trembled, echoing her desperation. The shadows twitched closer, and Sarah felt the walls close in like the fangs of a monstrous beast, ready to consume them whole. It hit her. There was no escape if they didn't act quickly. With a fierce resolve, Sarah lunged toward Claire, the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Hold on to me!" she screamed, reaching
for her girl's hand, feeling the clammy grasp of fright seep into the air. But as she bridged the gap, the figure lunged forward, its hands skeletal and ghostly, reaching for Claire, dragging her deeper into the whirlpool of shadows. "No!" Sarah shouted, determination fueling her every movement. She yanked Claire back, just in time for the icy grip of the figure to pass inches from her. The shadows recoiled from the power of Sarah's fear, and in that split second, adrenaline flooded her senses. "Run!" she yelled, zigzagging away from the grasping darkness which seemed to pulse with hungry disdain. Claire clutched her tightly as they dashed toward the door of shimmering light. As they ran, the world shifted, distorting, the walls bending, warping the very fabric of reality. "Sam!" Sarah cried, regretting her desperation as she glimpsed back into the room. But he was gone. The shadows had shifted, and a cold realization washed over her. There were no safety nets in this hell. She gripped Claire's small hand tightly, focusing on the sliver of light ahead. Push through. They had to reach that door. "Mommy, I can't," Claire gasped, trying to keep pace. Sarah could feel Claire's fear intermingling with her own, thickening the air, causing each breath to feel like it was punctured by dread. "Yes, you can. Just trust me," Sarah urged. In that moment, their bond shimmered with sheer determination, an invisible thread of resolve stitching them together against the gnashing jaws of despair. Each step was a battle against the entity's will, the darkness roaring and swirling around them, seeking to drag them down. Their footsteps echoed like drums of war, a desperate rhythm pushing them forward. The door loomed closer. It seemed to pulse as if responding to their resolve.
Just as they reached for the handle, the shadows howled, and the figure shaped from darkness lunged again. This time, it wasn't just a shadow. Sarah felt the blast of icy air against her skin, like death whispering sweet nothings. "Let go of her!" Sarah screamed, the raw emotion tearing from her throat. At last they reached the door, and with a surge of strength, Sarah flung it open, light flooding into the space, sending the shadows reeling. The figure howled, receding back into darkness as they spilled through the threshold. Breathless and disoriented, Sarah shielded Claire, positioning herself protectively in front of her as they both tumbled past the opening. The glow from beyond enveloped them, a warm embrace that felt like home. But as they stumbled into the blinding light, reality began to warp once again. Colors twisted, flashes of memories flickered around them, laughter, love, even pain. And in an instant they crossed over, landing hard on the cool grass of their backyard. Gasping, the oppressive weight of the darkness lifted like a curtain pulled off a stage. But as reality solidified around them, Sarah froze. The peaceful sights of the neighborhood felt unnaturally bright. "Sam!" she shouted, heart racing anew. "Where's Sam?" "Mommy, I'm here!" His voice came from the shadows near the fence, where it whispered uncertainty. Relief surged through her, but the grip of fear tightened once more. Torn between hope and dread, she turned to her children. "Stay with me," she urged, moving to the sound of Sam's voice. But the darkness shifted, slithering closer, hungering for their fear once again. "Mommy!" he cried, his voice trembling. The shadows wriggled from the depths of Treetop Lane, as if alive, searching for their next victim. "Hang on!" She darted forward to grab Sam, but he lurched back, eyes wide with terror. "Don't let it take me!" he begged, desperation carving deep lines into his small face. "No, never!" Sarah shouted as she felt the icy fingers of darkness wrap around her own. The figure from inside the house materialized again, draped in malevolence, its chilling laughter ringing out, a taunting echo that threatened to ensnare Sarah once more. "Together now!" she encouraged, her voice steady despite the terror that clung to every syllable. "We're stronger together! Grab my hands!" There was no hesitance this time. With a fierce symphony of love and fear, the children clutched tightly to her, forming a protective circle against the onslaught of shadows. And as the darkness surged, seeking to drag them back into the void, Sarah drew upon every ounce of strength. She screamed with raw determination, pushing against the shadows, tearing through the dark cloak that bound them with love. "You don't own us! You don't get to take us!" Light exploded, radiant and warm, bursting from within Sarah as they stood united, a fierce wall of love against the encroaching night. The shadows hissed and screamed, faltering against the power of their bond, reeling back as the blinding light engulfed them. With a final roar, the darkness fractured, splintering like glass, and in that moment, freedom flooded in. They were standing on the lawn, shaken but safe, illuminated by the comforting glow of their home. As the night receded, streaks of dawn painted the sky. The horrors of Treetop Lane were only echoes now, deep in the recesses of their minds. They were free, but left with lingering shadows of fear. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" Claire whispered, her small voice quaking, yet somehow filled with hope. "Yes, we are," Sarah rasped, looking at her children, her heart swelling with love. "We're home, together." But deep down, a sense of urgency remained. As she glanced back toward the now dim path of Treetop Lane, she wondered how many more lay in the forsaken grip of the shadows, and how many stories remained untold. And with that realization heavy in her heart, she vowed they would protect their home, their family, and shed light in the haunting darkness. No more fear, no more shadows. Together, they would always face the night. Don't wait even one more second. If you loved this conclusion, subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive.
Stories? Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and share your thoughts. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. And please, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to support the channel now.